Morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started. This is our Thursday, May 16th, 2019 work session. We will begin our agenda with an announcement. We've added the community grants work session, which was deferred from yesterday. And as you can see in the agenda that was added is item 2C. We're going to start with a public hearing. This is a public hearing on a supplemental appropriation to the FY19 operating budget for Montgomery County Public Schools in the amount of $4 million for new curriculum. Action is scheduled immediately following this hearing. For everyone scheduled to testify, please bring copies of your written testimony to the clerk at this time. And for this item, we have Ms. Judy Koenig. All right, well, actually, let me see.
What? Oh,
Hold on. Is that right?
sorry about that.
Okay,
need
it's just
one
that I
more
seem to
table
have,
out.
one
Here.
second, Ms. Koenig. All right, go right ahead, Ms. Koenig.
I'm sorry, this is going to take a few seconds so I can, if you all put your fingers in your ears, I'll make some comments about my computer system and ability. May I call someone up here instead who has seen what I want to show you and can comment on it?
Dr. Orland, can you assist, or can somebody assist Ms. Koenig?
And
please?
can we start this timer over?
We haven't
Young
started a
man,
timer.
would you please take a seat next to me?
Well, we can start the timer over. Dr.
Do I
Orland
need
will
to
be-
have him identify himself?
We know him well.
You
He'll
sure?
be okay.
I just want to know. All right, rather than trying to show this to you, this young man saw the video that I was trying to show you of the two school buses going head to head on Colston where they don't belong, one of them having to back up through Ellingson's intersection with a car behind it and kids walking. And that's because there's insufficient room on Colston for the school buses, which is why prior to the agreement to put the bus lot up by Colston, because it took us years to get it off of there, the agreement was that the school buses would go Grubb Road into the lot on Colston and back out again. Most of the buses do it. Yesterday morning, 7 trips through that intersection at Colston and Ellingson, some of which run the stop signs, some stop. This has been going on. He's seen it. He saw the video, so he can tell you he saw the 2 school buses going this way. I'm asking you to come up with some way to honor the commitment that was made to our community, and when they agreed to let them put the bus lot back on Colston, because it took us years to get it off. After a child was almost hit, you put a circular drive in front of the school. They went Grubb Road in and out and back, and they stayed off of Colston. They're not doing it. Most of the buses do go up the Grubb Road in and back, but again, yesterday morning, there were 7 trips through that intersection. None of them belong there. I don't understand when the cars go down East-West Highway at 50, 60 miles an hour, you want all that school buses putting out at Colston. And it's only, I'm surprised that no one's been killed. And I'm tired of seeing kids have to jump out of the way. Parents have to pull kids out of the way. Now, will you tell her that what you officially say?
What she said. I did actually try to reach out to Todd Watkins at the MCPS. He hasn't had a chance to get back to me. I'll call him again after the session this morning and report this. They can hear.
She can hear you.
They all can hear, believe me. So I will be doing that.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Dr. Orlin. I think that Ms. Koenig, has shared this with us a few times. I actually had 2 children at Rock Creek Forest Elementary School before the renovation, and always, understand how difficult it is to navigate through there. So we will monitor that response, and I think it may warrant maybe an official letter from the Education Committee to so that we can get the response in writing to see how they can address this very important issue.
Okay, may I make a suggestion then? Can you get an audio loop system in here with hearing phones so that I can hear you, or you can come up with $1,000 so I can buy a hearing aid?
All right, we'll take that into consideration. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Okay,
We
so
don't have to
now we
figure
are
out how
on
to
to
do
item
this.
number 2, and this is a work session on FY20 operating budget and FY19 to 24 CIP amendments. In this particular section of the agenda, we're going to take straw votes. Sorry. First, we have to take action because we just closed the public hearing on the supplemental appropriation for the FY19 operating budget, Montgomery County Public Schools, for $4 million for a new curriculum. And the source is MCPS fund balance. Moved by Councilmember Rice, second by Councilmember Katz. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous regarding the curriculum. Okay, so now we're on to item number 2, and we're going to start with a capital budget wrap-up and CIP reconciliation. For that, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Orlin.
Good morning. Every time we get to this point each year, we need to try to match resources to expenditures in the capital improvements program. They're typically what the net result of what the council's done to date is higher than what the resources are, and so this is mostly an exercise of reducing and delaying decisions, or not decisions, but projects that you've made tentative decisions on to date. Just as a little bit of background, this year is more difficult than most, although not the most difficult over the last 27 years, because it's an off year for the CIP, and the only projects we can touch, if you will, are those that were introduced as amendments, because everything has to go through a public hearing for this kind of year. And on year, basically every project is subject to CIP reconciliation. Secondly, as a result of the Board of Education's decision on sequencing the Woodward and Northwood projects, it created an opportunity but also a challenge for this reconciliation. The opportunity is it actually freed up some resources in FY20 and also to the 6-year total to some degree, because money effectively is now being spent or will be spent beyond FY24, particularly on the Northwood project. It creates a large challenge, though, because in years fiscal 21 and 22, that one action actually adds about $64 to $65 million into those fiscal years that weren't there before. And in addition to other decisions you've made to date, there's basically $80 million more in those 2 years total than can be afforded. And so what this exercise was about was to try to essentially clear money out to some degree from fiscal years 21 and 22, at the same time trying to accelerate as much as possible or restore as much as possible, I guess is the way to say it, many of the non-recommended CIP cuts in the school system that were put forward by the superintendent at the request of the Education and Culture Committee. So with that, I'll go through I could either go through each line of the packet or just do the summary. Council President, which would you refer me to do? It'll take about 10 minutes to go through the whole thing, about 3 minutes to do the summary.
Summary.
Summary is what you like? Fine. Summary is what it is. But just know that all of the actions in the packet, not just those I talk about, all of them have to be approved for the CIP to be reconciled. Anyway, the main points are that, first of all, the general obligation bond targets for fiscal years 21 and 22 need to be raised by $10 million each year, and that the targets in fiscal years 23 and 24 reduced by $10 million in order to stay within the 6-year spending affordability guideline. This is, again, trying to match resources to revenues. This case is increasing resources in those middle 2 fiscal years and reducing in the last 2 where they're not really needed. Secondly, because of some additional revenue that we think is coming in is coming in fiscal year 19, and particularly in impact taxes and to some degree recordation taxes, although not so much. We were able to go larger with the resurfacing residential roads supplemental that the executive sent over first in January and then later increased in March. His latest proposal is to increase the FY19 funding by $3,885,000. This would increase it by $10,111,000. Thirdly, in terms of the the restoration of projects from the non-recommended cuts, first of all is to restore the planning and design funds for Highland View, Lake Seneca, and Thurgood Marshall Elementary School additions on the schedule that the Board of Education requested, which is fiscal years 20, 21, and 22. Next is to restore all the funds, planning, design, and construction for the McNair Elementary School addition in Germantown and the Parkland Middle School addition in Aspen Hill, but with a one-year delay. In other words, the planning would start in fiscal year 21. Completion of both those schools would be September 2023. The next and last of the restorations for the non-recommended cuts is to put back to the board's initial request the FY20 funding for PLAR, restroom renovations, and roof replacement. It's $1 million, $500,000, and $1.5 million respectively. And then finally, on many projects, there were a lot of deferrals of funding from fiscal years 21 into 21 and 22 into fiscal years 23 and 24. The 6-year totals on those projects are the same, but it does move some monies out for those years. And again, the details of this are shown in the packet. The last thing I think I want to mention is that on page 6 of the packet, near the bottom, you have the ending reserve or the starting reserve for this as a result of this CIP reconciliation. You'll see that the reserve for FY20 is about $12 million, which is fine. The reserve for the 6-year total is $159 million, which is fine. But pay particularly close attention to fiscal years 21 and 22. Despite moving a lot of money out of those 2 years and despite increasing the spending through the higher target for bonds in 21 and 22, we still have to go with a very small reserve, about $16 million in 21 and $21.5 million in 22. They're about $10 million each lower than what we'd like to be able to have at this point, which means the next CIP is going to be very difficult in terms of adding monies in the first 2 years of the CIP. That really won't affect too much projects that are introduced that are new for planning. For construction, because the first couple of years is usually just planning anyway, and the big years that you'll need the money for are in 23, 24, 25, 26, and there will be plenty of money there. But it will be difficult to restore some of the level of effort projects in 21 and 22, because there just isn't much there. So with that, again, if you approve all of the steps that are outlined in pages 1 through 6 of the main packet, you will have a reconciled CIP. One last point, sorry. This does free up $689,000 on one hand to the operating budget. On the other hand, there's $359,000 from the operating budget into the CIP to fund additions to the cost-sharing project. Now I'm finished. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Rowland, thank you so much for this amazing work. I know that you have met with council members to explain the different puts and takes and understand the interaction between those decisions and those moves. And it's never easy to, at the end of the process, have to take a look at this and maintain the priorities and, try to reflect as much as possible the fiscal realities that we are facing. Really do appreciate your expertise and your recommendations. Don't see any lights. So with that, I believe that I need a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Rice.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Reamer. All those in favor, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, number 2, item 2B is the council reconciliation items for capital and operating budgets. For that, I believe we have Ms. Michelson.
Thank you. You have before you the reconciliation list.
This reconciliation list is a subset of the many worthy items the council identified through your budget process. This is a process of picking the highest priorities. For that, the council president worked with, I know, you and your staffs to understand the council's priorities. Ultimately, the grand total of the reconciliation list is $16.6 million, less than half of what was originally identified. So again, this was an exercise in the council picking its highest priorities, and it is before you now.
Okay. It's been moved by Councilmember Rice. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Friedson. Also want to thank all of my colleagues and their chiefs of staff, as well as Ms. Michelson and your team for working so hard to get us to this point. It is always so difficult to have to make these decisions. It seems odd that with a particular decision that is not such a large number, a large dollar amount, it seems like we have, yes. So with that, yeah, well, we need to take a vote first. But I appreciate the, please, yeah. Okay. So as I was saying, this is always difficult exercise, but I think it reflects, a lot of the priorities and a lot of the interest of our constituents. And I believe that when I look through this reconciliation list, it's a balanced approach to a time where we know resources are limited. So I appreciate everybody that worked so hard on this item. So with that, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you so much. All right, so for item 2C, this is community grants, and I will turn it over to Ms. Chen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carolyn Chen, Council Grants Manager for Montgomery County. What you have in front of you is the approved or recommended, you will approve it, hopefully, of community grants recommendations from the executive, the council, and the grants advisory group. There are, the list is 335 organizations, capital and operating grants. We presented this information as one list of all the grants recommended by everybody with the total amounts that the council will vote on to recommend for approval.
Okay. Can you please quote that total amount? I don't have it in front of me.
14.5 million, 335 organizational programs.
All right, and so this is a combination of what the executive has recommended and what the council, and the council community grants as well.
Yes.
Correct? Okay, well, Ms. Chen, thank you very much for all your very hard work. We do have an advisory group that does make recommendations. It's ultimately your job to take all that in and do the final evaluation. And I think that, this list, once again, reflects many of the priorities of this council. It also has provided some opportunities for amazing nonprofit organizations that are doing incredible work. That have stepped up in many innovative ways to address many of the outstanding issues in our community. And I am proud to say that this is a really important aspect of this particular proposal, because we do have to make space and room and allow very innovative and creative approaches to solve many and address many of the issues that we as local government cannot necessarily do. So I appreciate the careful consideration that was given to that. And I also want to remind my colleagues that we have already started to do a lot of work in terms of reforming the grants process. And that work, it is my hope and it is my commitment that we will wrap this up this year so that we can have a process that is definitively, and it's also a process that incorporates both executive and council grants. It is my hope that we can have one grants program and process so that there can be clarity as we move forward. With that, let's see Councilor Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I did want to note that one of the grantees, Cornerstone Montgomery, Inc. Has been considered for $50,000. I'm on their board of directors. I would ask, I would certainly am supportive, but I can't vote on that. I would ask that if that could be pulled, please, and then I could vote on everything else. Thank you.
Sure, we can do that. Councilmember Feetson.
Yes, thank you. Similarly, I'm on the board of Bethesda Green. I'd like that to be separated out and recuse myself from that particular vote.
Okay, so with that, I believe I need a motion. So moved by Councilmember Joando and seconded by Councilmember Reamer. We're going to vote on the rest of the grants except Cornerstone and Bethesda Green. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. All right, so now I need a motion for Cornerstone. Moved by Councilmember Rice. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Albornoz. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, and that is everybody with the exception of Councilmember Katz, who has to recuse himself because he's abstaining. All right, now on to Bethesda Green. I need a motion. Moved by Councilmember Reamer, second by Councilmember Katz. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous with the exception of Councilmember Feetson, who has to abstain because he's on the board. Okay, so now we've done that. Now, item 3 is action on a resolution to approve the FY20 transportation fees, charges, and fares. As you recall, we held a work session on Tuesday, and so for that particular one, we have Mr. Smith.
Thank you. As you noted, the council did a straw vote on this on Tuesday. They accepted all of the T&E committee's recommendations from that packet, except for the Wheaton enforcement hours. The resolution reflects that, the straw vote there. In addition, it now reflects the Kids Ride Free program as you all saw in the reconciliation list. So that is now available for all bus hour operations. So the resolution before you will approve that change as well as the changes that you did a straw vote on Tuesday.
Excellent. I don't see any lights. Is there a motion? Moved by Councilmember Reamer, seconded by Councilmember Rice. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Awesome. Okay, so now we have a consent calendar. So I need a motion. Moved by Councilmember Rice, seconded by Councilmember Reamer. Any discussion? No discussion. So with that, all those in favor, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. All right. That is super exciting. So now we can make some remarks. This is a really exciting moment. This is a very unique, obviously a very unique year, given that this is our first budget as a reconstituted council with a new administration. So this is a very, in my opinion, special budget indeed. I'm proud to say that this $5.8 billion operating budget that I have shepherded along with my colleagues and is here before you today turns our talk into action by providing strategic investments that will assist community members, enhance our quality of life, and meet the complex needs of our dynamic county. For me, this is a proud moment, for this budget brings together many of my priorities in my work on education, economic development, and workforce development with a focus on equity, fiscal prudence, and sustainability. This budget says that we are a people-friendly and a business-friendly government, and that we care about our employees. This year, we listened carefully to concerns from community members, and their views have informed our budget decisions. The council heard from more than 150 residents who testified in English, Spanish, and French at 5 public hearings. We received phone calls, read hundreds of emails and correspondence, monitored social media for feedback, and met individually and as a team with residents and community leaders because we care and we wanted this budget to reflect our community's input. I want to thank all my council colleagues for their dedication and hard work throughout this budget process. Compromise is never easy, but we did it. We came together around core priorities established in my proposals, such as providing $2.9 billion to fund the Board of Education's request and Montgomery College. We earmarked $7 million in new funding for one of my top priorities that is shared by many of my colleagues, the expansion of early care and education options for approximately 600 children. protecting our safety net services by providing essential funding for our nonprofit service providers, including $1.85 million for the developmentally disabled supplement, and providing additional funds to support small and mid-sized arts and humanities organizations. We provided $1 million in additional resources to expand the Kids Ride Free program and funded salary increases for our outstanding public safety and county government employees in a manner that is fair and sustainable. As chair of the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee, I am pleased to say that the 2020 budget holds the line on taxes and increases our reserves to the targeted 10% as mandated in our fiscal plan. That's awesome. The council also provided $128.3 million in additional resources for other post-employment benefits, OPEB. The county has been fortunate to retain its AAA bond rating since 1973, which is longer than any other county in the United States. And we believe these actions will help retain this critical rating. This council also is committed to working with the county executive on his plans to right-size the government. Kudos also to our delegation in Annapolis who worked tirelessly to bring back our fair share of state dollars that enabled us to address many of our critical budget issues. Thanks to their industry, I was able to work with the leadership of Montgomery County Public Schools, the county executive, and my colleagues to develop a successful plan to fully fund MCPS. Throughout this budget process, we had to innovate, collaborate, and be proactive and transparent in getting the appropriate data and information for our decision-making. I want to thank our staff for working with me on reforming the budget reconciliation process. We were able to conclude that work in record time this year. We will continue that reform process with the community grants, and I look forward to doing that, working collaboratively and above all, respectfully with my colleagues. There are several critical players in this budget process. First and foremost, I want to thank my team. I want to express my gratitude to Roland Ikeloa, Berta Cersosimo, Mayra Cruz Solis, Benjamin Price, and Craig Wilson for their outstanding work. The Council President's Office works many weekend, early morning, and late night hours that often go unnoticed. While the work we do is extremely rewarding, it requires a high level of commitment and dedication. I see the effort that each of my team members have put forth into their jobs each and every day, and I value and respect each of you and your contributions. I also want to express my appreciation to our council staff, for they are essential in our decision-making process and deeply committed to serving the public. I want to thank the council central staff led by Executive Director Marlene Michelson, Deputy Director Glenn Orland, and all the staffers, as well as the Director of the Office of Legislative Oversight, Chris Seelar, and his team. I am grateful for the work of the Public Information Office as well, that is led by Sonia Healy and her awesome team. In this 21st century age of the internet, communication is key. Recognizing that, we ensured that this budget included additional dollars for our communications team to help meet those amazing and ever-changing needs and outreach in communication. I want to recognize the clerk of the council, Ms. Megan Lamarzi, for working closely with my office to strategically plan the work of the council and for keeping us on task throughout this budget process. A big shout out to our sixth floor administrative assistants, Angela Matarisi and Nancy Riccardi, who have bravely managed the traffic of appointments and phone calls during this budget process. I salute County Executive Elrich and his staff. His proposed budget provided a good starting point for our budget work, and more important, as a team, we are ushering in a new era of collaboration between the executive and legislative branches of government. I appreciate Mark's willingness to work with us as a team, and let me pause and say also a big thank you to the OMB staff led by Director Madalino for their willingness and their amazing attitude as well as hard work in providing answers to many of our questions in a timely fashion. We really appreciate all of your work. Finally, narrative and context are really important, and I'm proud of our work on economic development and workforce development. On this dais, we have signaled that we will take a hard look at our economic development and workforce development strategies to make our county more business-friendly. The data shows that we are making progress on the economic front. However, we can always and must always do better. Our unemployment rate when I started at the council back in 2009 was 5.3%. Today, our county's rate is lower than both the state and national unemployment rate at 3.4%. Even as our county has changed, the economic results show clearly that the engines of our robust economy are driven by the hard work of our diverse community. There is plenty to celebrate in who we are. We must continue to build a society that respects equity, fosters inclusion and respect for all, and sees our diversity as an asset at all levels. At the end of the day, a budget is not just about dollars and cents. A budget reflects the values of a community. I'm proud to say that the fiscal year 20 budget lights the flame for a bright fiscal future that will benefit Montgomery County and its residents in a manner that is fair and equitable for all. Thank you to my colleagues again for all their hard work and for getting us to this point. And with that, I'll turn it to Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. I first want to thank you for your leadership in guiding us through yet another challenging budget year. Because our county executive initially didn't fund many of the core basic needs that were funded in years past, we had tough decisions before us that had to be made regarding maximizing resources to meet the many needs of our residents. And I feel our budget reflects a well-balanced approach to funding the many services and amenities that contribute to our quality of life. This was the first year of our newly constituted Education and Culture Committee, spearheaded by our council president. It gave the committee an opportunity to focus and highlight the arts and culture in our community, including things like our libraries and arts venues. And we as a committee pushed for expanded hours for libraries, thanks to the leadership of our lead for libraries, Councilmember Jawando, and for more money than the county executive recommended for grants to arts nonprofits. These additional funds are going to provide operating support for organizations and growth in emerging and historically underserved sectors of our arts community. I want to thank my colleagues, Councilmember Jawando and Council President Navarro, for their stalwart support on the Education and Culture Committee. We worked through a myriad of issues regarding our school system and Montgomery College and putting forth a budget that prioritizes education funding for our county, taking us from an education last to a pro-education budget. As chair of the Education and Culture Committee, I am pleased that today we have before us a budget that truly reflects our county's commitment to education as this county council fully funds both Montgomery County Public Schools and Montgomery College's budget requests. By prioritizing resources, we send a strong message that Montgomery County continues to value these institutions, and they play a crucial part in everything that we do. From economic development to crime prevention to ending homelessness to aiding our most vulnerable, they all couple with education. MCPS and Montgomery College are on the cutting edge of programs and initiatives that help lift our students and residents up and forward toward financial security and career success. Now, Montgomery College submitted a very thoughtful and modest budget, which included early college and summer bridge programs in partnership with MCPS and enhanced scholarship opportunities that help expand access and protect affordability, giving students various means and ways of achieving their higher education goals. They are the largest community college in the state and second largest post-secondary institution after the University of Maryland. And through their insightful leadership of Dr. Darian Pollard and her faculty and staff, they continue to create student gateways to success in addressing the achievement gap, particularly amongst our Black and Latino males, and providing career technical opportunities such as IT, biotech, construction, and homeland security, just to name a few. This council has also prioritized Montgomery County Public Schools, fully funding the Board of Education's request of $2.66 billion, which is $16.9 million above maintenance of effort. At roughly half of our budget, some question whether the continued investment in our schools is sound. The reality is that not funding MCPS would be much costlier. Full funding will allow MCPS to further enrich their reading and writing interventions, add counselors to elementary schools, and enhance after-school activities in schools with greater socioeconomic impact. This year, I've had the distinct pleasure of working with Dr. Jack Smith, the superintendent, and school board president Shebra Evans as we embark on their vision and mission to enhance our school system to ensure success for all of its students. They agree our students are just as diverse as their needs, and therefore our school system must be adept at continuing to implement programs and services our kids' academic and social emotional needs require to be met. The county embarked on a bold mission of funding the expansion of early childhood education, giving our beginning learners the best opportunity to start kindergarten prepared to succeed. And I want to thank Council President Navarro for her leadership in that role. My work on the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education, also known as the Curran Commission at the state level, is directly aligned with this initiative, and I look forward to our continued expansion. Now, safety and security has undergone a comprehensive review within MCPS last year, and this year's budget includes funding for several initiatives being implemented in our schools. A critical component of that when it comes to safety security is our school resource officers. And I'm very pleased we were able to add 2 school resource officers for our middle schools in the coming year that will allow us to have a middle school school resource officer in each of our 5 police districts. And after meeting with our African American Health Program, our Latino Health Initiative, and our Asian American Health Initiative programs this year, I was convinced we needed to give them additional funding to enhance their work. Thanks to the support of Chair Albornoz and Councilmember Glass of our Health and Human Services Committee, increased funding will result in more community outreach and health and mental health screenings to combat health disparities seen in our communities of color. Now, you'll hear from some of my colleagues about other budget accomplishments, including restoring cuts made by the county executive to our developmentally disabled community, the expansion of hours for the Every Mind text chat line, restoration of cuts to our mobile ag lab that educates our children on the importance of farming and ag sustainability, increased funding for pedestrian safety audits, restoration of cuts to our senior programs in Clarksburg, medical and dental services for our Care for Kids program, and last but certainly not least, restoration of cuts to ride-on routes, as well as expansion of our Kids Ride Free program for our residents that rely so much on public transportation to be able to get to work, especially in our up-county region. I am proud, Madam President, that our budget reflects our county's priorities. I want to thank all of our county stakeholders for your ongoing partnership with this council in making this budget possible. Many people have heard me say it plenty of times before. A budget should be a moral document of who you are and who you want to be. I want to thank each and every one of my colleagues because I feel that this council has once again accomplished that goal. And I really want to thank my team, led by my Chief of Staff, Steve Goldstein, who has powered through this year. And I really want to thank my other staff, my Deputy Chief of Staff, Sharon St. Pierre, and Daniela Moya-Gaber, and Rose and Nicole for really being there to continue to make sure that I have a team that I can call an extended family. It means a lot to me. Madam President, I do unfortunately have to leave because I do need to present at a National Center on Education and the Economy conference in about 45 minutes in D.C. But I did just want to say thank you again for your leadership, and thank you to my colleagues. This could not be done without each and every one of you, so thank you.
Travel safely over there. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President Navarro. Really appreciate your efforts this year. I know it is a consuming job to be Council President through the budget process, and I really appreciate your work, as well as the work of all the Council staff and my staff and all the Council members. This is always one of the most intense periods of the year and one of the most exciting. I am pleased with many elements of this budget. The fact that we are able to fully fund MCPS. I believe now this is the 4th year in a row that the MCPS budget request has been fully funded, and that is really terrific news. We're continuing to make a lot of progress with our schools and also fully funding the college. And I am very grateful to the state. I think in this instance, the state's decisions enabling revenue to flow into the county made a huge positive impact for us. You know, we couldn't have secured the funding that we did without the good work of the state to make education a higher priority. So I really want to acknowledge those decisions that played out in a very positive way for us here. And I share the view that the council's work to push very hard on education and to ensure that that request was fully funded was essential. I'm also very pleased with our step forward on early education. This is the third year in a row of a sizable investment in early education, millions of dollars added to our investments in pre-K and childcare. And I think we're continuing a strategy of step-by-step working our way towards a much more expansive and ultimately universal program. And I'm really happy about that, and I hope that the new structure that has been established will help promote consensus about how some of those investments could be made, and we'll be following that along closely. I'm really happy about Excel Beyond the Bell. Once again, we've added significant new Excel Beyond the Bell programs, 4 programs, which now is the same amount that we were able to add each year in the last 2 years. That brings the council's additions to 8 new Excel Beyond the Bell programs in our most challenged schools with very high poverty communities. And I think that expansion is really going to make a big difference. We also, for the first time, added Rec Extra programs targeting middle school. And there's a big gap in our out-of-school time program at the middle school age, and I'm really pleased we're hopefully beginning to address that in an ongoing way. I really want to thank my colleagues for their support of the Skills for the Future Fund. I think that is a terrific initiative championed by many council members to leverage more funding to our nonprofits that provide STEM education and help to get this county's workforce started at the youngest age and make this county the stronger economic powerhouse that we need to be. On the transportation side, I'm really happy that we were able to restore at least 4 of the 7 routes that were cut in the executive's recommended budget. I am disappointed that we did not find the funding to restore all 7 of those bus routes, taking service from 20 minutes to 15 minutes to 20 minutes is sure to lose riders on some of our busiest routes. And so we have work to do there. I am disappointed in the recommendation, but I'm pleased that my colleagues on the council did support restoring at least 4 of those routes that we were that were recommended for reductions in the executive's budget. And I am thrilled by the new investment in Kids Ride Free. I think that's going to hopefully create a whole new generation of transit riders that will benefit the county for years to come. I want to really thank my colleagues for supporting the capital budget on the BIPA program, the Bicycle Pedestrian Priority Areas. That program was recommended for significant reductions in the executive's capital budget. The council restored them. There's going to be some terrific projects moving ahead in Wheaton, in Long Branch, in Purple Line areas, in the Veers Mill, Randolph, some of our older areas in the county that were perhaps designed as suburban and have really become urban and need new treatments in order to promote safety. So I really want to recognize that, as well as the restoration of funding for the metro entrances. I think that is moving in exactly the right direction, and it doesn't appear that there was really ever much to the hope that the Metro Board would step in and fund our metro stations, and we really do need to step up and have the best metro infrastructure in this county. The climate initiative, I really want to thank my colleagues for supporting $400,000 to begin a comprehensive climate planning strategy. We had wanted to have $800,000 for this initiative. We originally had been told by the executive branch that they had secured $400,000, and then that was removed for a savings plan. And unfortunately, we just didn't have the funding to add that portion back. But I do think we'll get a great start with the $400,000 that we've added. And on the park side, I really want to thank Councilmember Friedson for his relentless leadership on park funding. I don't think we would have the outcome that we have today, fully funding the critical investments we need in parks without Mr. Friedson's strong advocacy. Last comment I want to make, I do feel that we have an underlying challenge that we're going to need to address. We have a structural deficit in the county. We've had one for several years now. It's not a new phenomenon, but we do need to really tackle that head on. And council has expressed a view that this year we're going to really try to make some changes there. Council President, for example, highlighted the need that we've talked about around right sizing. We have a underlying challenge in this budget in that FY20 expenditures are funded with FY19 revenues. And this has been going on for several years. So we really do need, as a county, as an executive branch, council branch working together, need to tackle that and make some changes. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I think we've made a good step forward, and I'm really grateful to the support of my colleagues, certainly for the initiatives that were of greatest interest to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Reamer. Councilmember Albornoz.
All right, good, hardworking people. We are here. As we've heard many times before, it is undeniably true that budgets are, in fact, moral documents. And I am proud that this budget represents the moral compass of this body, which I do believe bends towards social justice and the pursuit of the common good. And I also believe that our North Star is ensuring fiscal responsibility, racial equity, and economic prosperity for all. And let me also state for the record that before joining this body, I did not need reading glasses. In this budget, we are putting a heavy emphasis on equity in all facets of this $5.8 billion budget. With an equity lens firmly in place, we are making investments in education, safe and healthy communities, our environment, affordable housing, and a strong safety net for our most vulnerable residents, while taking into account our county's incredible diversity and striving to reduce the racial and ethnic disparities that we know exist. This budget is also about balance. It holds the line on taxes. It is a lean budget that has forced us to struggle with competing priorities, as we simply cannot fund everything that deserves to be funded. I'm proud to say that although it is a lean budget, it is also a sustainable budget that sets a firm foundation for our future. We enjoy a high quality of life here in Montgomery County, and we will continue to make progress on our shared goals as long as we scrutinize our spending, commit to a strong reserve, and maintain our AAA bond rating. As chair of the county's Health and Human Services, I'm proud of our continued dedication to the health and well-being of all of our residents. And I believe the headline for me, as we deliberated and discussed the budget for Health and Human Services, was that our safety net remains strong, but that it's being challenged and is being challenged every day because of the increasing poverty we're seeing in the county, the increasing demographic shifts we're seeing, and the record number of caseloads across the board, and numerous challenges with housing. This just underscores that our tax revenues are not keeping pace with the demand that we're seeing among our public. Thanks to the incredible dedication of county staff, the hard work of Health and Human Services, and our valuable partnerships in the nonprofit sector, we're able to keep pace, but certainly more needs to be done. Restoring funding for the support payment to organizations that provide direct services to people with disabilities was a top priority for me, and I know my colleagues as well. I'm passionate about the people and organizations that do this tremendously difficult but important work. We are seeing a sharp increase in adults with disabilities and special needs, and make no mistake that unless we provide a stronger infrastructure moving forward, then we will face unprecedented challenges ahead. We cannot afford to ignore the realities we'll be facing in the near future, and therefore I will be convening a work group to chart a path forward that will ensure equitable and fair funding for the organizations who do important work in this important space. The council will also need to look at addressing this vulnerable population holistically, working with our state delegation and our state partners to fully integrate our services so that we can address the needs of this community seamlessly and affordably. Our nonprofit providers, and I started my career in the nonprofit sector, are a crucial link in delivering health and human services to our most vulnerable residents. These important partners often struggle to absorb the administrative expenses to be able to carry forward these vital programs. And that's why we fought hard for an across-the-board 3% increase for these organizations so that there can be more administrative capacity in this year and moving forward. And we cannot leave them without the resources to provide the high-quality services that we expect of them. Another area we struggle is in providing resources needed to intervene earlier with our youth. This is an extremely important investment in our future. We've added more school resource officers and funding for critical mental health needs and programs in schools. And I'm particularly proud that we are working on further closing the opportunity that exists in the county through the expansion of Excel Beyond the Bell and Rec Extra in both our elementary and middle schools. And I want to thank my colleagues for their leadership, and in particular, Councilor Reamer, who's been a strong partner in this effort, not just this year, Council President Navarro as well, but in many previous years as well. Early intervention is an investment that will garner benefits well beyond the dollars spent. And this truly is an education-first budget. It not only fully funds our Board of Education's request, but will also provide MCPS with an additional $16 million in state funding stemming from the Kirwan Commission recommendations to help close the achievement gap. This is a great win for our exceptional school system, and this funding will continue to provide investments in special education, pre-K education, and the reduction of elementary school class sizes. English language learners, economic parity, teacher salary increases, and mental health and support resources will also be provided through this budget. Recently, I met with a group of students from Montgomery College, and as I shared recently during our work session, having both of my parents having attended Montgomery College leaves Montgomery College with a near and dear place in my heart, and I would not be sitting here literally without Montgomery College. And it was in that meeting with those students that it really underscored how valuable Montgomery College is as an asset in our community, not just from an economic development standpoint, but in really helping to shape the lives of these kids. The college does an amazing job of providing social and emotional support and learning that ensures that students not only thrive academically when in Montgomery College, but they thrive socially and emotionally as well. And I'm proud that we fully funded the college in this budget. Lately, we as a community are experiencing the effects of climate change, and this is undoubtedly the biggest existential threat facing our globe today. And so I'm proud that we were able to place $400,000 in this year's budget, acknowledging that much more needs to be done in the future and that we need to take a broad and holistic approach to climate issues that go just beyond the Department of Environmental Protection, but that fully involve public-private partnerships with our community and our private sector. We've also made a big commitment to affordable housing in this budget, having added an additional $5 million thanks to the leadership of my colleague, Councilmember Friedson, within the Housing Initiative Fund, above the county executive's recommendation. And that is another significant issue facing our community across the board. Housing is a crisis in the county, and affordable housing means different things to different people, but we have to acknowledge that much more needs to be done now and into the future to ensure that we have a sustainable place for people to live within our community. And so, as I close, colleagues, I want to thank my staff, and in particular, the entire team, Joy Nurmi, Lillian Cruz, Beth Schumann, and Maida Bayonet. I also want to thank our council staff, especially Ms. Michelson, Ms. Linda McMillan, and Ms. Vivian Yao. And I do greatly want to thank our county executive and our executive branch. The $10 million that you led us off with was certainly very helpful throughout this process, and I appreciated the collaborative approach that led to the addition of some funding towards the end of our budget process that will lay a better foundation moving forward. And I look forward to partnering with my colleagues in the executive branch on looking and exploring at a 2-year budgeting option, but also finding efficiencies and trying to fill needs as they exist throughout the entire county. And lastly, I want to thank my colleagues. It is an absolute honor and privilege to serve with all of you. You are remarkably bright, dedicated, patient, and I am so thrilled about what these next 4 years are going to look like. And finally, Council President Navarro, to you in particular, you've been a mentor and friend for many years prior to me joining this body, and watching you in action behind the scenes as we deliberated over some pretty difficult issues, and I'm sure more moving forward, was impressive. And I can't thank you and your team enough for all that you have done to support this body through yet another challenging fiscal year. Muchas gracias to everybody.
Gracias a ti. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you and all of my colleagues for your leadership for this, not just during this time, but for all the times. Webster defines budget as an estimate of income and expenditure for a set period of time. Our FY20 budget is much more than an estimate for the next fiscal year. It provides the financial parameters by which we will try to accomplish almost everything that we do. How we provide for our students, how we outfit our first responders so that they can protect our residents, how we meet our transportation needs, where we spend our leisure time, all depend upon the annual budget decisions made by this council. The budget was, in many ways, similar to past budgets. We heard from the public, from our employees, we heard from each of our departments, and we weighed many, many competing priorities before making our decisions. These were not easy decisions, but I am confident that the expenditures in this budget accomplish many good things, which also while also continuing to allow us to address long-term fiscal responsibility through fiscal restraint. Not all of my priorities were funded, but budgets are made up of collective compromise. A few years ago, as I was working through one of my first budget as a county council member, I stated that it was important to me to avoid kicking the can down the road. We need to take ownership of the issues, especially the difficult ones, and we need to address them now. As I reflect, I am pleased that we continued to honor this commitment. My role as the chair of the Public Safety Committee has allowed me to gain an even better understanding of our public safety agencies and their priorities. We depend on them at our most challenging times, and it is so very important that we ensure that every first responder has the training and equipment they need to serve the public. We are able to fund 2 additional school resource officers who will be so beneficial to the students with whom they will interact. This budget also has funding for 2 sheriffs. These positions are necessary to ensure safety in our courtrooms. I am disappointed that there were no additional police officers funded, but I will be sure to have the Public Safety Committee continue to examine the needs of our police department. As we all know, 1/2 of our budget funds Montgomery County Public Schools, and we have a world-class school system because of this. It took some real negotiating, but we were able to fully fund the school system's requested budget, and for this, we should all be very proud. Additional funds were also allocated to expand the Excel Beyond the Bell programming, which will benefit some of our neediest students. Montgomery College, of which I attended, our stellar community college, deserved to be fully funded, and I am more than pleased that the council was able to restore funds to make them whole. MC is a vital part of our community, and we need to fully support them. Our youth will also benefit from the resources we were able to direct to broaden the reach of our Rec Extra programs, which provide after-school activities in some of our most underserved communities. And after hearing loudly and clearly from students that the Kids Ride Free program is of vital importance to them and is environmentally friendly, we added back funding for this program so that students can access public transportation without having to worry about the cost. I am glad that the Board of Elections will be receiving some additional dollars so that they can purchase enough voting equipment to reduce what can be significant wait times on Election Day. Our focus on meeting the affordable housing needs of our seniors will be bolstered by the innovative Senior Home Sharing Pilot Program that will help to provide secure, affordable housing to seniors while helping to prevent social isolation. Finally, we could not accomplish nor provide all that we do as a county without the support of our nonprofit partners. Montgomery County is so fortunate to be home to so many amazing nonprofit organizations. It is incumbent upon us to support these groups to the best of our ability because they give back exponentially. We help to fund as many of our fantastic nonprofits as we could, given our finite dollars. Similarly, that is why it is so important to me to be able to assist the many groups who provide direct services to those with developmental differences. It is gratifying to work along such capable colleagues as well as with their amazing staff who are always ready to answer questions, research options, and provide us with the most thorough analysis of each and every issue. On a personal note, budgets are a team effort, and I want to thank my team, Lisa, Mary, E., Jackie, and Laurie, for their hard work. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawanda.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you to all my colleagues. This is an exciting milestone for me, and I will echo Councilmember Alvarez's point about just it's been great to work with all of you, each of you. I don't know if I'll mention everybody, but I will now. Councilmember Alvarez, Councilmember Rice, in abstention, Councilmember Friedson, Katz, Council President, Councilmember Reamer. I got you. Councilmember Hucker and Councilmember Glass. Some of you get another highlight in the speech here, but I wanted to just really say it's been a pleasure working with each of you these last 4 months. It's 5 months. It seemed like a lot longer, but I'm looking forward to continuing that. Council President Navarro, thank you for your leadership and your hard work throughout what I know and have come to find out firsthand is one of the busiest and most difficult times to be Council President. So it's been a pleasure to work with you, to learn from you, to sometimes get correction from you, and so I congratulate you on your job well done. It's always in love, so it's great. I also want to thank all the council staff, and I know most of you are down here, many of you are down here. Each of our offices have hardworking staff that we rely on as we sort through an enormous budget, as was mentioned, $5.8 billion. I want to thank all the analysts in the central staff who have taken the time to walk us through and explain and re-explain and argue and debate and all the many things that we do with you. Thank you for answering our questions. I want to thank my staff, Cecily Thorne, Walton Harris, Pamela Luckett, Fatmata Berry, Christopher Mabry, and James Prevette. Thank you for always striving to meet what I know can be extremely high expectations. So thank you very much. I want to touch on a number of my budget priorities that I'm pleased receive funding in this spending plan, because as has been said, a budget is nothing if not a moral document. When we decide our spending priorities, we demonstrate what we value. And to be clear, this was not as smooth a process as the final product seems. We were not able to fund everything that we would want to, or everything that we need, frankly, for the residents of Montgomery County. The widening of the wealth gap, our changing demographics, and current federal policies will continue to make our future budget decisions difficult. But this is a good budget that balances the needs of our community with fiscal prudence. I'm grateful to my colleagues for the alignment we have maintained on many Montgomery County issues that I hold as top priorities. First, I'm excited that we've added funding to help the many at-risk youth through a number of programs related to our libraries, our recreation centers, and our schools. We've added Friday and Saturday hours in programming at recreation centers in high-needs areas of the county. This will provide our youth a place to be safe and have fun during those critical hours on Friday and Saturday nights. As the council lead on libraries, I am extremely grateful to my colleagues for hearing my many impassioned pleas to restore hours to cuts during the Great Recession to Damascus and Long Branch libraries in some of our most impacted communities. Our libraries are not just a place to check out books. They are job centers, they're media hubs, and community gathering spaces. I know for me as a child growing up in the Long Branch community, my public library helped me on the road to learning that allowed me to grow as a student and as an adult. Every child and person who walks into our libraries has an opportunity to learn and grow. So I thank my colleagues for that support. Montgomery County has invested wisely in refreshing our rec centers and our libraries, and I'm excited that we can maximize these investments while we support our communities. It deserves notice here also that the efforts of President Navarro, County Executive Elrich, the School Board President Shebra Evans, and MCPS Superintendent Dr. Jack Smith were able to close a significant funding gap in our schools. In addition, we took action as what I call the best committee, but I like the Fed committee as well, the Education and Culture Committee, with my colleagues, and that's Councilmember Navarro and Rice, to restore and fully fund Montgomery College's budget request, a crucial stepping stone for many of our residents looking to enrich their lives and prepare for better paying careers through education and career certification. Thank you all for your work. Another major priority in this budget, and one that I push for, is funding for additional wraparound services in Montgomery County Public Schools. I'm thrilled to see funding added to expand Excel Beyond the Bell to 4 new elementary schools, in addition to the Rec Extra programs that Councilmember Reamer in our middle schools. I think that's a big deal. We need to do more, but it's a big deal and it's a big step forward. This after-school program, Excel Beyond the Bell, has demonstrated success to help close the achievement and opportunity gaps for many of our at-risk students. Through enrichment, work, exposure to the arts, STEM projects, sports, and other activities, they are better positioned for success in classroom and in life. I want to thank also my Fed colleagues, Councilmembers Reamer and Friedson, for all of our work to expand dollars in the HIF on the CIP side so that we can have more affordable housing. We also commit to supporting our young people by funding mental health initiatives, something many of us are very passionate about, including myself. We were able to increase hours for our county-wide mental health texting hotline to run until midnight. I raise this because it's an essential tool to help our young people through very difficult times. The hours we have added between 9 and midnight are often a time when our youth are alone and vulnerable. And this initiative will also make sure that they have access to talk to someone in those times. I also introduced an initiative that I'm proud that was funded to add mental health therapists that will serve in our middle schools. This will literally be a lifeline for our students. 1 in 5 of our students face a significant mental health issue, and suicide is the 3rd highest cause of death for people between the ages of 10 and 14 years old, and 2nd for kids between 15 and 19. Our mental health crisis needs to be addressed, and I know this won't solve it all, but I think it will help, and I look forward to working with my colleagues to continuing to expand the continuums of services for our young people. I'm also pleased to see investments to address our environment. From restored bus routes to funds to prioritize climate change, we are making a statement to address our climate emergency. While these items are good, we need to do more, and I encourage our county executive to add more funds through supplemental amendment during the year to continue our work when needed. I congratulate my good friend and seat buddy, Councilmember Glass, for making Kids Ride Free a reality. This is both an equity item and an environmental initiative that will help those at-risk students that I talked about earlier get to our recreation centers for evening programming and get to our libraries. But it also creates more transit riders in the future, a durable transit-oriented generation, which is what we need if we are going to reduce the number of cars on the road and the carbon in our air. A small but impactful item I urge my colleagues to include on our reconciliation list is restoration for the Montgomery County Agricultural Education Fund. Our agricultural reserve is one of the crown jewels of Montgomery County, and educating our MCPS students so they understand the importance of open space, of agriculture, and where their food comes from is critical to keeping our kids healthy and protecting the ag reserve for future generations. So I thank my colleagues for that support. I think, again, this is a good budget. that does a lot with limited resources during a difficult time. I look forward to working with all of my colleagues and the community going forward to do even better next year and the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you. There is a lot to be proud of with this fiscal year 2020 budget we preliminarily approved this morning. We'll make real progress in core priorities, including education, transportation, affordable housing, protecting our most vulnerable, and maintaining our world-class park system. This budget doubles down on our investment to education, one of our most indispensable economic and social resources. A special kudos to Council President Navarro and Education and Culture Committee Chair Rice, our school system leaders, and the county executive and administration for coming to an agreement to actually fully fund our public education system, which is absolutely crucial. We also fully funded Montgomery College's budget so it can continue to be such a positive force in the lives and future careers of so many people in our community. We restored funding for Ag in the Classroom, a popular program that teaches MCPS students about the importance of agriculture in our daily lives and something that has been a hallmark of Montgomery County's history. And we retained capital funding for the Kid Museum for a total investment of $6.89 million with $185,000 in grants and another $250,000 for a Fund for the Future to support coding and technology education, as you heard from Chair Reamer earlier. We're helping to build a more sustainable future for our county with modern transportation and housing investments, restoring $5 million in the county's Housing Initiative Fund to help public and nonprofit partners keep pace with our needs and maintain the progress that we've made in recent years. And I appreciate several of my colleagues for noting that today as one of our core priorities and for the universal support of this council on this huge effort. We rejected proposed ride-on service cuts and added funding to expand kids ride-free in all service hours with relentless advocacy from Councilmember Glass. We provided $500,000 for Fair Share, continuing a program that provides matching funds to employers that subsidizes transit for their employees. We kept the design and planning of Summit Avenue Extended in Kensington on schedule to provide a shared street for residents to get through Kensington and a safer pedestrian and bicycle experience for everybody. We maintained funding for the White Flint Metro Station northern entrance, signaling our commitment to infrastructure investment in White Flint Pike District area, one of our county's most important growth areas, so we can move forward once we have a concept study there later this year. And by adding funding for additional pedestrian safety audits, we can make the engineering changes necessary that will make our roads safer for all users moving forward. We are so fortunate to have 37,000 acres of parkland in Montgomery County and 271 parks for our residents to experience and enjoy. As the council's lead on parks, I worked alongside my colleagues to ensure our Parks Department has enough funding to maintain the open spaces that are so vital to health and quality of life. We're protecting the most vulnerable in our community by supporting the vital work our nonprofits do every day as partners of this county government, bolstering security and improving mental health services to keep our kids safe, secure, expanding mental health services for youth in crisis at times when they are most isolated and alone, restoring funding for those who do the necessary and often extraordinarily difficult work of assisting those with emotional and developmental differences, and supporting the expansion and programming of the Manna Food Center and Nourish Now so residents in need have the food they need to survive. While I am proud of what we've accomplished together in this budget and the progress we're making on our core priorities, I think it's also important to recognize the continued discussions we absolutely must have on how to achieve true fiscal sustainability. I continue to be concerned about balancing budgets by deferring funding of our obligations and by using one-time savings to fund ongoing costs. I'm optimistic that we can work together to tackle these structural challenges, ensure a fiscally sustainable budget process, and a thriving private sector economy that will allow us to maintain the high quality of life and high level of public services that our residents expect and deserve, and to keep up with our growing needs, as we always have in Montgomery County. I'd like to personally thank all of my colleagues for your collaboration, your support, your hard work and effort throughout this budget process. I feel like budget days are budget months, which has been a great process for me. And I especially want to thank my team who have just been extraordinary. Cindy and Aaron and Rose and Matt, who have really been tremendous and have really been the District 1 team to support our community and allow the work to be done in a way that it has. And a thanks as well to council staff for putting up with me and pushing back to me and being willing to answer the large number of questions that I've had throughout this process, and for your patience throughout it, including lots of conversations in the early parts of the day and late into the evening. This has been a significant effort, and I truly do appreciate all of the hard work that everybody up on this dais and everybody who works in this building, who comes to work every day to serve our community, to push forward progress on our priorities, and to make sure that we're doing the people's work in the greatest way possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President, for leading the council through this thoughtful budget cycle and for engaging us, especially the new members of the council, during this process, which at its heart has been all about equity. Determining the county's $5.8 billion operating budget has been an exercise in fiscal discipline, and it's also been an exercise in which we can put our dollars where our hearts are. I'm proud that members of this council have collaborated to make more services whole for some of our most vulnerable residents. And while going through my first budget cycle as a council member, I kept in mind the 1.1 million constituents who contribute to this budget and who depend on county services and programs. Unfortunately, in some parts of the county, access to these programs are limited and hindered because of transportation options. That's an equity issue. One of the leading indicators of social mobility is access to reliable transportation, and that's why one of my top priorities during this budget cycle was to ensure that young people have the expanded and free access to ride-on and Metro bus services. Every student should have the opportunity to succeed regardless of which school they attend or their household wealth. There's no reason a student should be walking in the cold or the rain because they couldn't afford bus fare. And there's no reason a student should ever miss a job or internship because they didn't have a reliable way of getting home. I fought with my council member support to expand the Kids Ride Free program to all hours to all Montgomery County youth under the age of 18. And I'm appreciative of the strong support by all of my colleagues. Expanding the Kids Ride Free program is the equitable thing to do, and it's the smart way for us to foster a culture of transit ridership and an environmental stewardship that will last throughout adulthood. In that same vein, I fought to restore bus services for our county's most heavily used bus routes. Bus routes 49, 54, 55, and 57. These routes serve many in our up-county who are less likely to own vehicles and already have few transit options. Earlier this week, a Montgomery College student who depends on the 55, 57, and 59 wrote all of us on the council asking to reverse these budget cuts. This student, Fernando, wrote, and I quote, "If there's a cut, it would mean I have to look for different methods of transportation, increase time to get different buses, and sleep less. Please do not allow that to happen to me and many other working class students that rely on those routes." Again, I want to thank my colleagues for supporting the restorations of these cuts, especially Councilmember Reamer, who has advocated for these bus services. I just wish that we could have restored funding for the other 3 bus routes that were cut during this budget cycle, but I'm hopeful that in the upcoming fiscal years, we'll be able to restore those routes as well. And as I said during our T&E work session, it's time for us to take a look at our bus routes as a whole and see if they need to be redrawn, given that there have been huge population shifts since they were last designed. Beyond equity, these initiatives have something else in common: environmental stewardship. I'm glad that we've, as a council, have supported the initiative to hire a consultant that can help us move the climate mobilization plan forward. I believe that this will help our county on a clear path towards fighting climate change. We are all experiencing the adverse effects of global warming, and to make the situation even worse, we know that environmental justice issues disproportionately impact vulnerable and poor communities. So funding for this climate change initiative will help ensure that we're doing our part here in Montgomery County so that this world is left brighter and better for everyone to come. And speaking of our future, earlier this week I was glad that we fully funded MCPS and Montgomery College, knowing that an investment in our county's young minds is an investment worth making. And as the council's lead on homelessness in vulnerable communities, I worked with my colleagues on the HHS committee as well as Councilmember Hucker to push for additional funding that is needed at Progress Place, one of our county's heavily used shelters, to ensure that the safety of clients, staff, and the community is at the forefront. And like my colleagues, I was moved by the passionate statements from advocates who represent those with developmental differences. And I'm glad that the restoration of funding for the DD service providers is included in this budget. And I commend the HHS Chair, Councilmember Albornoz, for leading those discussions, and I look forward to working with him and the work group that will follow to improve our processes and our nonprofit business models as well. And regarding the nonprofit sector, as a former nonprofit executive, I understand the increasing demands that we continue putting on our nonprofit sector and the work that they do. And I know that the 3% cost of living increase we're providing in our contracts is long overdue and necessary. And then finally, I want to thank Council Central staff for providing me and my team with the necessary information to analyze the county executive's proposals and to help us put forth sensible proposals of our own. And to my team, Valeria, Pete, Andrea, and David, thank you for bringing your passion, skills, and knowledge to my office and to all the residents of Montgomery County. There is more work to do. This budget is the first in our term. And as we move forward, I will continue making sure that our budget is fair and equitable to make sure that our county is a more fair and equitable one. But I do believe that this budget moves us forward, is fiscally sustainable, and puts vulnerable communities first. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Glass. Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Council President. Every budget is supposed to be as many of us have said, a statement of our shared values, but they don't all achieve that efficiently unless there's constant reminders of our shared values. So I really want to thank Council President Navarro for constantly reminding us our shared values in this big, fractious county full of multiple opinions, because I'm particularly excited that you've united the council and so many of us behind the mission of achieving racial equity and social justice this year. That's something many of us have worked on for years, and it's just very fulfilling to be at the dais formalizing that as a lens that we're going to reconsider our policies through in the coming years. I'm very much looking forward to that, and I'm very excited about this budget because I think it reflects that in dozens of ways. I also want to thank County Executive Mark Elrich. He had big shoes to fill, and he came into office relatively recently and inherited a budget that had been largely shaped before he arrived, and before his administration was even fully in place, he had to send us a savings plan. We've had some disagreements over individual items, but I'm very glad he's been so attentive to the council, leaving space in the proposed budget for our additional priorities, fighting for the county every day of the legislative session in Annapolis, which really paid dividends, and working with us to find solutions to the school funding and closing that gap. I also want to thank, now he's disappeared, but Budget Director Rich Madalino. You'll have to tell him, I called him out, and all his terrific staff. I knew that Rich would arrive in this job using his deep understanding of the budget to hit the ground running. He's really done that and been a great partner to work with, and I really look forward to working with him and all his staff in future years on the restructuring of government that we're really looking forward to achieve the structural savings that we very much need. And I certainly want to thank our constituents. I try to every year. The taxpayers of this county who are generous and wise enough to support a progressive and a responsible budget, and the hundreds of organizations and thousands of residents who follow our work, and they turn out at hearings and they testify at hearings and they call and email us with feedback and criticism and occasional compliments. I'm grateful for all of it. I wouldn't want to do this work in many other jurisdictions where folks have different values and don't participate as much as they do in Montgomery County, and we saw this year we maintained our reputation for deep and robust civic engagement on the budget. Overall, this is a budget that's principled, but it's prudent. It meets our obligations with respect to our essential services that our residents count on, like public safety, transportation, health care, and environmental protection, and I'm glad we got there without a tax increase. I'm very glad it fully funds our schools above the Board of Education's request, and I'm very excited about the new programs that the new educational funding will help, including reducing elementary school class sizes, expanding dual enrollment and middle college programs for high schoolers that are taking college classes, helping MCPS administer and expand the Summer Rise program, and adding counselor and psychologist positions based on enrollment and to enhance services, an area that I think we've neglected for too long. I'm glad it's adding assistant principal positions to elementary schools without one, and increasing the language exposure at elementary schools, which there's more and more demand on and continues to be extremely important. And finally, I'm glad that it strengthened and improved the background checks of school staff to make sure our kids are really safe. Excellent schools are critical not just to our children, but the county's whole well-being, and I'm very glad we were able to fully fund it above the request of MCPS. In my first year as the chair of the Transportation Committee, we made some important changes. I'm really grateful to Council Members Reamer and Glass for very much being approaching this in a collaborative way, for being on the same page about our values in the areas of transportation and the environment. Councilmember Reamer, I especially appreciate your advocacy to restore funding for the ride-on routes and the BIPAs, which I like to say as often as possible. And Councilmember Glass, I very much appreciate your laser focus on improving transit, making it work, and building the next generation of transit riders, because it's not going to work without them. Climate change is another lens that we must view all our county activities through. It's significant that we secured $400,000 to fund a plan of action to mitigate climate change. And while it wasn't everything we wanted this year, I think it's important to start this important investment to make sure we're making our future investments in the most effective ways. And in the capital side, two highlights for me, including restoring the win we had, the Three Amigos had 2 years ago, replacing the Forest Glen Metro passageway under Georgia Avenue to restoring it to our original schedule to demonstrate our commitment to pedestrian safety, and accelerating $10 million in additional capital funding for road resurfacing, something that's going to benefit every area of the county. And I especially want to thank our committee staff, Dr. Orlin, Mr. Levchenko, and Mr. Smith, for their outstanding work making us look good and easier than it usually is. As the District 5 Council member, I have to mention a few highlights that we pushed for in this budget cycle, and I'm grateful to my colleagues for supporting. I know they're going to have a big impact for my constituents. First, the right to vote is fundamental to everybody, but too many of my constituents waited an hour or 2 hours at Praisner to vote last fall. Other folks waited all over the county to vote, and many didn't get to vote because they were waiting in lines that were far too long. So I'm grateful to all of you, and especially to the County Board of Elections, Board Chair Jim Shalek and David Naiman in particular, for helping us secure $125,000 for new funding for ballot scanners to reduce the wait times. Because as the 2020 election approaches, we need to make sure everybody in this county gets to vote. We also added the $273,000 successfully for Progress Place for security officers trained in crisis intervention. Grateful to Councilmember Glass and all of you and the advocates who pushed for this solution. And we're not done. We're going to have to continue to work together to make sure Progress Place can live up to its promise. And in the school CIP, I'm very glad we restored the planning money for Highland View Elementary School and the funding for Francis Scott Key to prevent that cluster from going into moratorium, something that's happening far too often. That would have undermined the new development efforts in East County. And I'm very glad we restated this council's support for White Oak and our commitment to it and the economic development promise that it represents. Grateful to Betsy and Rob and all the advocates for pushing, and Pete for pushing for that so hard as well. We also funded something I'm really excited about that didn't get much attention, a critical funding for mental health and critical wraparound services for at-risk students at Paint Branch and Springbrook clusters. We all know we have way too many students that are facing
enormous stress and mental health challenges, and this is just a start, but it's going to make a big difference for many of them and, potentially prevent some tragedies. In East County, Council members Jawando, Albornoz, and I fought for the funding for the critical short-term drainage and field quality issues at White Oaks only ball field. It's a clear, obvious equity issue. It's long neglected, wouldn't have happened without the advocacy of Coach Fofo, and I'm very glad we're addressing the long-term maintenance by putting it under the jurisdiction of Park and Planning. And finally, we funded Montgomery Cares, which serves all of us, but especially many of my constituents' urgent health needs. I want to discuss with the HHS committee going forward, possibly partnering with neighboring jurisdictions so we can achieve some efficiencies, since we're caring for many residents of Prince George's and Howard County as well as the district. And I'm glad we funded the capital grant for MANA. So to wrap up, as always, we have to keep a keen eye on the future. Making these budget decisions is one of the council's most important responsibilities. We have to be accountable to our residents to ensure we're prudent stewards of the county's fiscal future. This budget helps us achieve that, achieves our long-standing goal of a healthy financial reserve. We safeguarded our AAA bond rating, and I'm very confident that we continue to have a very bright future ahead of us. I want to thank my colleagues for working together so well. This is the first year at the dais for all 9 of us, and in this as a group. And now you know what you're getting into. But it's been a great process. It's been easier than previous years and more collaborative, Council President. And I definitely need to thank my own staff, Dave and Andrea and Brian, Bob, Sean, and Jill, as well as our central staff, Marlene, Megan, Bob, and all the central staff for all their valuable research and assistance throughout the budget process and the rest of the year. And I look forward to continued work throughout the year. Thank you very much.
Well, there you have it. Lots of stories, lots of different priorities, lots of such important need out there. Our 1.1 million residents. There are just, again, so many shared opportunities and so many challenges, and they have been always very engaged with us. It is a tall order when you put it into perspective of a $5.8 billion budget, 9 of us working together with different perspectives, with different priorities, but at the end of the day, the common denominator has always been trying to make sure that we address the needs of those who show up here in these chambers, and at the same time, address the needs of those who are the most vulnerable, those who don't even know this process may be occurring, but nonetheless have the same level of importance to us. And so again, I am very proud to have had the opportunity as Council President to shepherd this budget along with all of you, and look forward to hearing more and more about some of these results. Look forward to some of the work that we have discussed also with the administration about possible different cycles for our budget examination, et cetera, so that we can understand how all of these decisions, what the impact actually is, and just thrilled that we have reached this particular milestone for this first year of a major leadership change in the county. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. I hear there are going to be some bill signings. They're going to be super exciting. So the work continues, and we are adjourned. Thank you.